All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our October general meeting for Washington Pilots Association. If you're not part of the Washington Pilots Association, that's okay. We're all really cool people, and you should hang out with us anyway. My name is CJ Amastoy. I am the president for the WPA local chapter here in Spokane. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We've got a really excellent set of great things happening, some great shares tonight. I'm going to get started with some housekeeping and some announcements. First and foremost, I want to share that we do have a couple of special guests, and I'm going to introduce those here in just a few moments, so be ready for that. In the back there at the table are a couple of clipboards. If you are registered for tonight's Wings event, which this does qualify, and you had signed up in advance on the Wings page, I want to encourage you to check that printout and make sure you sign in. I want to cover real quickly the sign-up process for Wings. We may have been doing it wrong in the past, and so we're trying to clarify this. When you attend a Wings event with WPA, we provide, whether it's through Facebook or through an email, or also, more importantly, on our website, a link to the registration. And we want to make sure that you are registering in advance so that you do get credit for what will soon become much more advanced and complex Wings trainings. So, Ms. Beek, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us where folks can get the link to our fast credit.
So we got two different main areas that you can find it on. The first one's going to be our website at wpaspokane.org. And if you just kind of scroll right down to our main page here, you can see our gorgeous president, CJ, there. And then just below that, you'll find our meeting info for the upcoming month or the next month, however you want to look at it. So in this case, we got the 20th October monthly meeting. And then down here at the bottom, you'll find the link for the Zoom and then also the Wings credit right down here at the bottom. Clicking that link, we can go ahead and just click it here real quick, just so you can see what it looks like. It's going to bring you to the FAA's website, and it's going to kind of break down the information that you can expect for the webinar that you can also find on our main website. Basically, what you have to do is you just got to log in at the top with your kind of right over here.
Right over there. You want to make sure you do log in prior to the event.
Yep, and then it's pretty self-intuitive after that as far as registering goes. So
absolutely.
Perfect. Is that better now? So it's very kind of explanatory. Once you log in, you click on the various registration links, and Roger, maybe you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong. Does it send you a confirmation email after registering for the Wings credit? Yes. Okay, perfect. So that'll be your kind of your clue there, if you did it correctly or not, is if you got that confirmation email afterwards verifying that you did it correctly. The other way that we can get the Wings credit link is on our Facebook page. So we have our WPA Spokane Facebook page. We always try to create an event, but typically about 3 weeks prior to the actual event taking place. So if you guys are on Facebook, make sure you definitely check us out. But if you go into the About section on our event, you can typically find, it might be under the discussion here, I think is where I posted it. We usually get the Wings link anywhere from about 2 weeks to a week prior to the event. So I know it's sometimes a little bit later than the event gets posted, but this is where we'll post any updates for this monthly seminar that we have, and where you can find the link on Facebook. So in this case, you can see right here where it talks about pre-registering for your Wings credit, and it'll take you to the exact same web page that we were just on a second ago.
Cool. John, go back to the web page.
Yeah, sure. I can get back over there without this thing. What's up?
Next future meeting. Describe that.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yep. So it talks about next month's meeting, which I'll be leading on. Yeah, I know. I saw it. CJ sent me a.
I just want you to know that we are looking at the website.
Yeah, we want you. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Dave. I know that you probably had a good time typing that in.
Thank you. So again, to recap, the clipboard in the back is for those that have already signed in. Now, let's say you weren't able to sign into Wings online and you forgot all about it. That's okay. You can still take care of that. Now, if you've never signed into Wings before, if you've never received Wings credit, there's also a place for you to sign up back there and get that credit. It'll allow us to enroll you by signing in. So be aware of those options back there. We've also got some our information, our Wings newsletter, little newspaper back there. It's awesome, filled with great stuff, including articles from our very own Roger Birch as well. So make sure you guys are aware of those. I'd like to go ahead and just share briefly that we do have a special guest. Mr. Shane Rogers is with us tonight. He is the owner of No Limits Aviation in Coeur d'Alene. And I asked David, had brought him along and invited him, and I asked him if he would just mind sharing just a little bit about No Limits Aviation, a little bit about himself, because he is an important part of our aviation community in the business. So I'll let you go ahead and stand, and you can share just a few minutes.
Hey guys, I'm Shane Rogers, No Limits Aviation, as he pointed out. I also own work seaplanes down at the dock, so anybody you guys rode on the Beaver down at the dock, that's also me. Yeah, a little bit about us. We're a flight school maintenance. We broker airplanes and maintain them, so a little bit of everything. There's a lot of that around, but we're here to help you guys and hang out and see what you guys are all about. So I've been informed there, but looking forward to future meetings.
Cool.
Hey,
Thank you very much. Yes.
Who's also, as of tonight, a member of our.
Well, then let's give him a round of applause because being a member of this group is important. So.
Where are they?
Bevan. Mr. Bevan. There, yeah.
Mr. John Bevan, well,
Got
again,
his money too.
well, it's even better. We got the money. That's even better. Well, welcome. This is
Got his money too. That's what I told him. I'll take anybody else's money.
as our dutiful treasurer would. So excellent. Thank you and welcome to you guys. Thank you for becoming members. We always appreciate that. We are the second largest chapter of Washington Pilots Association, and I would venture to say probably one of the most engaging of the chapters in our state. So we're very blessed to be able to do this, and we've got a great board. If you are interested in how you can contribute to the activities, the events, certainly plannings, we want to encourage you to come check out our board meetings, which if you go to our website, you'll see are all there planned out, the dates and so forth. So great information there to be looking at and how you can contribute. I want to also mention real quick that we had this past weekend, one of our most important events. It was our fall foliage veterans flight. Mr. John Miller was kind enough to lead that experience and our volunteer pilots. And we took out, how many veterans did we fly that day, John? We had a dozen veterans. That's a really solid number. And 7 airplanes. Wow. So, you know, great opportunity for us to be able to be in our communities, helping and sharing a great experience such as flying with those veterans who've done so much for us. So just a couple of photos. If you go to our Facebook page, you'll see a lot of our events. We have these images captured there. So a lot of great information and great stuff to see. If you're interested in participating in these events or they're planning again, jump on our board, come to our meetings. By all means, we would love to have you a part of that. This little guy right here, I'm just going to share with you real quick, is some of the ways that we pay for some of these events. One of the things that we did for the veterans was we purchased lunch. And so after their flight, they got to have a comfortable social event, lunch. And that was courtesy of WPA at Dave Lucky's hangar. So I'm going to pass this little can around. And if you got a couple of bucks or $5 or $1,000, we would happily take that for you. And you can put this in the can. So I'm going to drop this here. And if you guys, if you've already put some in or not, maybe just pass it around. Those funds go to paying for some of the things like our technology that we use. We're using Facebook. We have a subscription to Zoom. That's what the bucket resource goes towards. And we're very grateful for any contributions in our bucket. Okay, the first person I want to bring up before we get to our keynote speaker tonight is Mr. Roger Birch. Roger is our liaison, of course, to our FSDO, and Robert Tickner with FAA for our FAST material that is so important to these meetings. And he's going to share with us some information recapping the wings registration. If you have any questions, he can answer those. Also, we are going to share with you some information about some GA real estate opportunities in some areas where, you know, flying is a little easier around our areas. So he'll share a little bit about that. And then I think you're going to mention, as the person that's in charge of our nominations committee for our board, he's going to share some of those things as well. So Roger, I'll have you come up.
Thank you, CJ. As a past president, one of the duties we get to do is to be on the nominations committee. It's really easy this year. Went up to the board and said, do you want to stay on the board? And they all said yes. So what we have for nominations is, and you'll be voting next month, by the way, President C.J. Amistoy, President-elect, who's kind of like our Vice President, John Miller, Secretary, Angel Bass, Treasurer forever, Dave Lucky, and 3 directors, Dennis Rolfson, Dale McLaughlin, and John Deep. So the board has all the fillings there. However, to help the board out, we do have committees, and we have a few volunteers that have helped out a great. If you'd like to help out with some of the organization activities, you know, please see CJ or a board member and move on with that. Next item is, you know, most of us kind of fly out of Phelps Field, but there's some pretty neat places to fly around here that are they're very close. One of the ones I like is Roselia, and Roselia just recently resurfaced the runway. They also have a new traffic pattern on runway 20 with right traffic. Makes it a little bit easier. But this past week, I met with the mayor down there, and they're looking at expanding the airport. And the first phase is going to be this year. And what they're going to offer is they have pavement and they have tie downs. These tie downs will be available for $30 a month, 6 months in advance. And there is a sheet in the back there called indications of interest. So if an airplane that is looking for a place for hard pavement tie down, this winter Brazil will be pretty good. Now, further down the road, there's some things we're already talking about with the mayor of Roselia. One is they're looking about putting a fuel pit in. What they're looking at putting in is going to be a fuel island that will have non-ethanol premium MoGas. I know many of you guys right now are part of the bucket parade with your 5-gallon canisters, putting that unleaded gas in your airplanes. This would be a great opportunity for pilots to go down there, fill their aircraft up in a short cross country, and so forth. Going back to the tie downs, if we get 10 people that have aircraft at Roselia, they will receive a $150,000 grant from the FAA, and that will go right back into the airport. And one of their future things they'd like to do is they'd like to put some hangars in. I think the approach they're probably going to take is going to be having a private contractor come in and put hangars in that will actually be a little more affordable. The last hangars at Phelps Field, I understand, were about $200,000 for the big hangars. The new T hangars, I've heard rumored to be about $120,000. I don't know where people live in town here, but I can tell you that my commute from Cheney to Phelps varies from 20 minutes to over an hour. My commute down to Roselia by car is about 35 minutes. So it gives a pretty good alternative there. With respect to wings, I encourage everybody to pre-register, because I run out a printout that comes right off the FAA website, has your name on it. People I saw here, I just initial for them, they'll get their wings credit. If you are a member of Wings already, but you forget to register, you just sign the second page of it. The second clipboard for people that want to be enrolled in Wings, essentially ask your name, the email you want to use with the FAA, and also your zip code. And if you do that, Robert Tickner and myself will make sure that you're enrolled in Wings and you take full advantage of it. We are going to be going next year to try to get all 3 core areas for activities in our schedule with WPA. So we have roughly 8 meetings a year. We'll try to get those 3 core ones in for the FAA, and the remaining meetings will be just like that. Any questions on Roselia, Wings, or nominations? If anybody wants to nominate someone to compete against the nominees, they can do so tonight, and they can also do it again at the November general meeting where we'll have the elections. Typically, our elections are by unanimous consent because we have good people coming on board and pretty happy with them, and do encourage you to get active with the chapter. That's all I got.
Thank you very much, Roger. Just to touch on the scenario that we were just describing there, if any of you have flown out of Phelps or have flown around Deer Park or Coeur d'Alene, it's kind of like, you know, taking your bets as to whether you're going to kick a hornet's nest or not and be flying around in it. Because, you know, with that sort of traffic, you know, it becomes a little bit more challenging unless you're leaving the area. So when we look at general aviation in the area, we're always about supporting the opportunities for growth, opportunities to expand where there are going to be opportunities to have an airplane, to tie them down, to store them, to maintain them, to fuel them. That's all part of what we do at WPA. And so I'm really excited about the opportunities out in Rosalia. And again, if you have an airplane and are struggling to find a place to tie down, or maybe you need a hangar, the future could very well be down there. We encourage you to sign up for a tie down or get in touch with Roger about how you can connect with folks there at Rosalia. Okay, let's see, what else do I have here on my fancy list? I think I covered all the bases here. One quick reminder, if you have not you've not completed your renewal for WPA this year, we just want to encourage you to go to our web or go to WPAflies.org and you can sign up there. Obviously, we have some great folks that are taking membership information here if you need to renew that. But I just encourage you guys to do that because there's a lot of value, obviously, in part of your organization. Okay, without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Mr. David Hale. Mr. David Hale is our keynote speaker tonight. He is an exercise aerospace physiologist, and he's going to be sharing with us a lot of great information tonight that is going to be awesome for reconciling that medical exam and experience. So, David, are you, there you are over there. We'll have you come on over here and we'll coordinate your PowerPoint for you. Oh, and one quick question. Did everybody get one of these, either in your station? Did anybody not get one of these? Okay, David?
Thanks. If you did get one of those cards, if you have any questions, this is a good place to put those questions. That way, at the midpoint of this presentation, I'm going to start answering those questions. So if you have medical questions, and especially if you don't want to raise your hand and say, I've got a problem or this or that, that's the way to do it, is to fill it out on the card. That way I can, don't put your name on it, just send it up, and that way I can answer your questions if you might have them, you brought them tonight. Hopefully you did. That's the goal tonight, is to answer questions for everybody that's here, if in fact you have them, obviously. Let's see here.
Get it.
And if you have a question in the middle of this casual presentation, again, the goal is to answer questions while we're here. So if you have a question here, or obviously anybody on Zoom who has a question, you can send it in and we'll do our best to get all those answered. And I will stay afterwards and answer questions as well if you have.
You collecting the cards now?
Just whenever you're done with them, I suppose we could just send them up. Maybe just somebody put them on the chair or
I can
something.
get your cards.
And,
There's a bucket to put them on. You guys are on. Pass that around.
thank you. It's great to have this technology. The topic which was chosen for me, which I really think is a great topic, is the options that we have as pilots. And that's really one of the things that I hope that we'll be able to talk about today, because oftentimes when you have a medical issue or a fitness issue, it's pretty normal to sort of feel like, not only don't know who to ask this question to, but no one really expects that there's really any solution. It's just, oh, I'm just stuck with this, and so I've got to deal with it. But having done this for about 27 years, I've seen a few ways around things. Not that there's going to be a nefarious process to get it done. There's really quite a few options, and the FAA is actually quite liberal when it comes to their policies. I didn't say the process was easy, and I didn't say it was enjoyable, but when it comes to getting certified, most people, if you're safe enough to drive a car, you're probably safe enough to fly an airplane. And we can probably get you certified despite what someone else may have told you. So there are a lot of other medical myths that come into play in these kinds of, in this realm. The the problems that a lot of people create for themselves is they listen to all the pilot chatter. You know, well, the way you get through this is you just say no to everything. And that makes a lot of sense, and we've all heard it. I'm a pilot, and I get it, and I have the same temptation that any other pilot does. But the reality of it is, in the end, in the long run, that is generally not going to work out very well. So there's a couple of things that the FAA looks at when they develop policies. One of those is the 1% rule, and that is to say, if your likelihood of being incapacitated, if your risk for incapacitation, whether it be subtle incapacitation or complete incapacitation, if your risk is greater than the general population, which is about 1%, then they don't want you flying. And it kind of makes sense. And yet, you know, it's hard to always translate what that's going to mean. But when they create legislation or rulemaking and that sort of thing, often there's something like the 1% rule that's underneath all that. And it has to do with being able to plot your risk. The good news is that if you can show that your risk is similar to the general population, then you're very likely to be able to be eligible for certification. As I said, it doesn't mean it's easy. The documentation and the aggravation of having to answer to the FAA on an aeromedical matter is never enjoyable. I've had to do it myself with my own medical, and I was very impatient. And it's an aggravation. But the reality of it is the standards truly are quite liberal, especially as compared to other countries. Most of the FAA standards are either more liberal than the other countries or equal to what you see in other countries. There are exceptions, but that's generally what you're going to find. There's a few airplane pictures in here. Anybody can speak up if they say what the airplane is or what the airport is that they see, shout it out. I mentioned things don't always work out really well when you answer no to every question. There was a pilot that I worked with years ago, and by the time he came to me, he had a bypass surgery and he had the sternal scar, but he had a tattoo, an eagle tattooed on his chest, so you couldn't see the sternal scar. He thought that would take care of it. Now, what ended up happening was he got some sheet metal, and they pulled his medical records, and oh, guess what? Long story is the short story on that one. Choosing an AME is an extremely important part of this process. Move this way, let me move this. Okay. Can I pull this table this direction? Well, no, I think we got it, man. Choosing an AME is an extremely important part of this process. A lot of AMEs, you know, basically they take this class, maybe they do a few physicals every year. This is an old statistic, but I think it's still probably accurate. 80% of the AMEs do about 20% of the total exams, and 50% or half of the AMEs perform less than 25 exams per year. Now, that's not every AME, but that's some AMEs. So before you go to an AME, you obviously want to find a good one. You want to find one that's involved with pilots, hopefully a pilot himself, in fact. And that is one of the ways that you kind of insulate yourself from these sorts of situations. We have a lot of good AMEs in this area. I think I overheard you say you're an AME, is that right? Well, I mean a lot. I have a lot of good AMEs, a lot of good AMEs. And a lot is probably it's a stretch too. You're probably right. I know Dr. Manteuffel in Coeur d'Alene is a good AME, and he's local. And you're probably a good AME when we were in there. It's too bad Dad retired.
When I retired, I called Rick and said,
well, you bring up a very important point, and what he said, if you couldn't hear it at home or on the Zoom, is that a lot of the AMEs have retired. It's an aging population. It's, for whatever reason, not as attractive as it used to be for people in practice, and so a lot of AMEs have retired, and it is hard to find AMEs. There are less of them, and so I misspoke in that regard. 92% of the pilots, though, when they're denied because they failed to provide the proper medical records. Okay, so most of the time, the reason why the pilot didn't get certified wasn't because the FAA hates them. It wasn't because they, you know, had to go through an aggravating process and they still didn't succeed. It's just they gave up. They just decided they were resigned to the fact that this was not going to work out, and they quit. And so that is one of the things that's important to notice. in the process is that if you're persistent, like I said, if you're safe to drive a car, if you're, safe to avoid the incapacitation from some condition that you might have, then the FAA is probably going to certify it. And so, anybody recognize that airport?
Is that Midway?
It's close to Chicago, not too far from there.
Oh, mixed.
Cleveland. It's Cleveland. So, medications is something that has more and more become an issue. There's a lot of different issues with different kinds of medications. Lots of different reasons why the FAA doesn't like certain medications. For instance, medications that have been FDA approved for less than a year, the FAA doesn't like them because they're just too new to really establish a true side effect profile. So they want to wait a little longer and see if the advertisement's actually for real and if these things are really going to be not having any side effects that might be a negative thing for flying. If it's a medicine though, that's like, you came up with a new aspirin, it's the same mechanism, then they're going to certify it. They're going to be okay with it. There's quite a few medications. We have one of the largest lists of approved medications on our website. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But new medications generally are something that the FAA is going to discourage unless it's something that, as I said, the same mechanism that they've seen before. Over-the-counter medications, generally you can find that those are going to be okay, but not always. In fact, quite often, over-the-counter medications and some things that even though the FAA doesn't necessarily regulate them, that doesn't mean that they're good for you. And so a lot of these things, for instance, herbal preparations that people get, have things that can cause all sorts of different issues, especially when you start pushing it up with altitude and things of that nature. It can create some problems. Benadryl is the most common thing that you find in aircraft accidents. A very significant number of fatalities. There was Benadryl that was used there. It's an over-the-counter medication that you can pick up all day long. Psychotropic medications is one of the things that the FAA has gotten into in the last few years, and they say that they approve 4 medications, but it's not that they approve everybody on any of those medications. So if you're on an antidepressant, for instance, it's very possible for you to be approved, but it's not automatic. And so there's quite a bit of hoops that need to be jumped through, psychiatric and psychological evaluation, if you're going to stay on the medicine. If you've taken psychiatric medications, that's not the end of the world most of the time. If you've got something like psychosis or schizophrenia, then it's probably going to be a problem. But if you've just had a difficult time, you've gone through a rough spot in the road, you needed some antidepressant for a period of time, then the FAA is going to be most likely letting you move forward and move on with it and be approved. Issues with the heart is the next thing I wanted to talk about just a little bit. This is the most common thing that we deal with in medical certification. About 60% of our clients have had either bypass surgery or stents or some sort of cardiovascular anomaly. We were just talking, Shane and I were just talking just a minute ago about some other issues that are sort of driving some of these things that they're just now discovering, such as sleep apnea. And they've now come to the conclusion that sleep apnea is one of the biggest precursors to somebody having atrial fibrillation, which is not something that you want your heart doing if you can keep it from doing that. So, but the biggest point I'd like to make about these cardiovascular issues is, yes, we deal with a lot of it, which means it's probably going to be certified. So just because you have a heart problem, just because you had a bypass surgery, just because you have, a small amount of clottage, doesn't mean that the FAA is not going to, the FAA is going to refuse your case. Again, the documentation is critical. It's very important that you get them what they need, but the chances for certification are quite good. Oops, missed one wrong. Again, sleep apnea, here's an acronym, it's something to think about. I don't normally talk a lot about the safety elements in these presentations, but if there's one thing that I could say tonight that I think might actually save a life or two, it might be if you considered whether or not you have sleep apnea, and this acronym can kind of help you do that. So There's a lot of people out there that don't realize it. Maybe their wife has complained that they snored, or who knows how they come by the information. But in our country, it's becoming a bit of an issue, and it's a driving problem that again is pushing some of the cardiovascular issues and conditions that we have that we didn't have as many of before. Anybody know that airport? There we go. Diabetes is a new frontier as well. Is a new frontier that we're dealing with a little bit more and more. The FAA has now created a commercial protocol for that, for people that are on insulin, that is. Used to be they would only, we didn't used to certify anybody on insulin, and it became a big deal. In fact, internationally, speaking of what I was saying about our country being a little bit more liberal, we were the first country to certify diabetics on insulin for third class, and now we're doing it for first and second. And I say we, just meaning this country. So the progress that's been made there for diabetics and for diabetes is quite good. It is the insulin protocol for the first and second class airmen has only been really going for a couple of years. The protocol came out about 2.5 years ago, and but they just started certifying pilots with that now. It is very complex. It's extremely complex. If you have questions about it, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. But it isn't an easy one to get. Those kinds of cases are all going to Washington, D.C., rather than being certified in the Oklahoma City level at the FAA. Stones, kidney stones specifically, is one of the things that we deal with a little bit that surprises people. People think, well, what's the problem with kidney stones? And if you haven't ever had one, then you might ask that a little bit more likely. But having a kidney stone is definitely one of those things that could at least distract you. And again, like I said earlier, the FAA doesn't want you to be even subtly distracted. And I have never had a kidney stone, but I've heard that it's a significant distraction when you have to pass one of those. And so the FAA is trying to control for that when they look at these things. It's not a simple process, but basically based upon the size and the location of the stone, they're going to be apt to certify you if they can. Typically, the worst case scenario is a procedure of intervention on that stone can bring you to a place where you're eligible for certification. Neurology is something that's sort of the up and coming issue with certification. There's been quite a bit of the increased conservative decisions with neurology issues, partly because there's new equipment now. When you look at an MRI from today versus an MRI from 20 years ago, it's completely different. There is things that they see now on these that they don't know what to do with. And it's very difficult when previously, they did an MRI on someone and they didn't really see much. And now they see more than they ever expected to see. And what are they supposed to do with that? And so it puts the FAA in a tight spot, but it also puts us as pilots in a tight spot. So you want to take care of yourself, and you want to keep in mind that the way that you take care of yourself and the way that you get evaluated means something, and it can turn into a difficult situation. Cancer issues are really a little bit more unusual in medical certification circles. You don't see as much of it, but it can be a showstopper for sure. Typically, if you're undergoing treatment, the way the FAA used to basically do it is if you're taking treatment for something like if you're taking chemo, let's say, for instance, they're typically not going to certify you. But there's a lot of other things that now that they do accept and allow you to keep taking, or just allow you to take as a preventive treatment, and they will allow you to be certified if it's safe to do that, and if, again, there's an unlikelihood for you to be incapacitated. One of the things I like to talk about is if, for instance, prostate cancer is a really common way in many of us, okay? And so people say, well, I have prostate cancer, my doctor just wants to do a wait and see kind of thing, and that should be no problem for the FAA. Why does he care about it? And he says, I'm never going to die of this. I've got, I'm already this old or whatever. The fact is that there are some problems where, for instance, someone who has prostate cancer where it can metastasize to the bony prominences of the spine. And there has been a case actually where spinal column actually snapped on takeoff roll and there was a crash as a result of it. So it can be an issue, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense to us as pilots. Our office is at Wiley Post Airport in Oklahoma City, which is basically a suburb of Oklahoma City. It's in Bethany. Does anybody know what the last thing that Will Rogers said to Wiley Post was? Wasn't that patch on the other eye yesterday? Monocularity is something that is now done routinely by our office. We do, I think, a few hundred of those every single. I think if I had to look at it, it'd probably be maybe a couple hundred in the last 3 years that we've done of those. It's not always for somebody that's lost an eye. It can be the eye doesn't meet the visual standard. So if you're not able to meet the visual standard for the class of medical you're seeking, and you end up, basically getting the proper documentation, you may be able to get a monocular waiver so that eye really doesn't even have to work, even though it is working. That is, again, one of the ways that you can get things done that wouldn't necessarily be looked at. Yes, sir.
Was there two of our pilots had monocular vision, and they got the demonstrator ability?
Yep. Yeah, it's a soda, as you just said, for those.
So I was shocked, it's flying with one eye, how do you land in that plane without depth perception?
So the truth is the depth perception doesn't it's not a problem long-term. It is initially, and so the FAA will make you do the soda. That's what the whole, they take a flight test, and they have to prove that parking the airplane is actually harder than landing it when you initially become monocular.
Good eye on the right side. Can you imagine that curve?
I'm sorry, ask the question please again.
Right eye, first on through left eye, can't.
No, they don't differentiate. That's a good question. That might be a good question of the night. I'm giving away a hat for the best question. I'll keep that in mind. Orthopedic issues. Generally speaking, these have not been a big deal, but they can kind of sneak up on you. And here's how. Maybe you have a back problem and you think, it's no big deal. I'm just taking aspirin for it and then getting by with it. It's no big thing. Well, how long can you sit in a chair without getting up? No more than about 20 or 30 minutes. The FAA might not certify it. So they want to know that you can do the things that you need to do as a pilot, such as being in an airplane for a couple of hours, which is very possible, and without having ungovernable pain. Again, there's that subtle distraction that you might be running into when you're having that kind of pain. The other thing is that people who've had procedures, orthopedic procedures, and they get discharged on pain medications, how does the FAA know that you're not still taking those pain medications? So they're going to have some questions for you. They're going to say, hey, yeah, I know you're fine, and I know we can see that you can use all your body parts again, and everything's great. But what did you do with all of those narcotics that you were prescribed? You had this. So they'll often look at that and make sure, they want to make sure that those things are taken care of. Pulmonary issues, the lungs has kind of come really strong the last couple of years for the obvious reasons for COVID. This is a COVID set of lungs here, and the FAA has been, I think, actually quite liberal about how they've worked these cases with COVID, because I think they have to. Essentially, the vaccines are accepted by the FAA as long as there's been a 48-hour wait period before you go back to flying. Most of the COVID, people who have had COVID are not going to have to even be deferred. In other words, your aviation medical examiner can approve you with the COVID history, as long as you weren't on an ICU, essentially, is what it comes down to. That's the demarcation. Yes, sir. There's not a question on the form about it, no, but it's a reportable office visit to medical professionals, so you do have to report it that way. And of course, any treatment that you've received would be also reportable, especially if you're still on it. So. Well, I'm not suggesting that you don't go to the doctor, but yeah, but the message you're hearing, I get it. So, and here's the other thing that gets a little bit kind of iffy. There's a lot of different, and I definitely don't want to get into the political arena tonight with regard to COVID, but I will say this: there are a lot of different things that are being used to treat COVID. And some of those are not labeled approved uses. For instance, ivermectin is a medicine that a lot of people are using for COVID. And I'm not here to talk about the efficacy of ivermectin. I'm just here to tell you that if you put ivermectin on the form and you've had treatment with the ivermectin and you're still on the ivermectin, the FAA is likely to not approve that because it's not an FDA labeled use for that medication. And so there's some issues with some of these things, and COVID has brought those out. As I said, generally they're approving most of these things, and it's not creating too much difficulty. Psychiatry and psychological issues that we run into in this field. Does anybody recognize this pilot?
That's German.
That's the German wings pilot. Yep, that was him on a run. Healthy guy. Nobody really suspected anything except for the few practitioners that he was seeing, and they didn't bother telling him about it. And so it became a real problem, obviously, for the people that were lost in that situation. The FAA doesn't do psychiatric evaluations. AMEs generally don't do psychiatric evaluations during their routine exams. Now, if they sense something, you come in and this guy's pretty funny looking, he's acting weird or whatever, they may do something if they sense that there's a problem. And I'm sure there's been people that came your way and they said, yeah, I'm gonna maybe ask a few more questions. But otherwise, there's really no psychiatric screening at the aviation medical examiner level or during that exam. But if the FAA comes by information that there is an issue, then it can become very, very complicated. We've run into and received clients from situations where, a guy's been flying for 20 years for whatever airline, and he has an argument with a flight attendant, and the next thing he knows, he's getting a psychological evaluation. And he says, well, there's nothing wrong with me, and he goes ahead and gets the evaluation, and the next thing he knows is, actually, there was something wrong with the evaluation, and he's not going to fly ever again. He's been flying for 20 years, safely, apparently. And so, the question is, where do these things come up and how do they come up? And we just need to be aware of the fact that it is a vulnerable place to be. It's a subjective place to be. It's one of those things where, like I say, you find what you're looking for. And sometimes people don't necessarily always pay attention when they need to. There's other issues with recreational drugs right now that we're all, I'm sure, well aware of. It used to be that you had to really look hard if you wanted to find marijuana, and now it's on every corner. In most states it is anyway. Not in Idaho, but it is in most other states like Washington. And just for the record, with marijuana, it is illegal still federally to use THC marijuana or THC. Some people are using all of these sort of supplemental things and herbal preparations and things with hemp and things that maybe don't have THC in it. The problem is that when you go to one of these local shops, they don't necessarily produce on the label how much THC or if there's THC in there. They just are telling you, hey, this is good stuff. And so you buy it and you think, oh, okay, yeah, that worked pretty great, but you didn't realize that you were scheduled for a pop quiz drug test the next day, and you flunk it because there's THC in there. So it is still illegal, and it's a buyer beware kind of thing with regard to THC. One of the things I failed to mention, going back just a couple of slides, about medication is another big common thing that we deal with, especially with the young folks. I talk to at least 20 moms every week about their son, and they're realizing now that putting them on Ritalin or putting them on another ADD medication is going to create a big problem. And so, is it okay to take these medications for a period of time at a young age because it helps them to concentrate? Perhaps. But there's a lot of people that are getting put on these without really taking into consideration whether this person's cognitive skills are diminished, and that's what they're putting them on, or we're just trying to settle them down. And so, it's tough when you're a teacher to rule a classroom of 20, 30, 40 people, let's say. And so oftentimes it's the teachers that's driving the process, and these kids are getting on this medicine and they've got no cognitive problems whatsoever. It may be a discipline problem, but it's not a cognitive problem. And what ends up happening is that when they get to a place like we're looking at aviation, it becomes a real big problem, because now the FAA says, well, it was diagnosed, you were treated, we're going to do a cognitive screening, and that may or may not work out really well. One of the things that we do with some of those folks, by the way, is we help to get them cognitive testing, and if they don't do well with the cognitive testing, then we are able to, in some ways, increase those cognitive fitness exercises that can be done now. And so we work to accomplish that with many of these folks to help them get them back. There's my favorite Halloween one there. Don't drink and fly if you can't read the little symbol there. Alcohol is something that we deal with quite a bit. I guess I should go back to the slide and mention it a little bit further. DUIs, the use of alcohol in the past is one of those things that it used to be just a death sentence. If you had basically an issue with alcohol, you were done. Now it went really the other way, where we could get almost anybody certified with DUIs. Now the FAA has gotten extremely strict about it, and they are following some people for life if they think that there's been a dependence issue. The FAA sees it a little differently than the garden variety substance abuse counselor or somebody that's even an addictionologist will look at it, and they will say, oh, we think this person's dependent because they had a high blood alcohol test, and so we're just going to assume this person is an alcoholic, and we're going to require them to be followed for the rest of their lives. And that could be a real onerous thing for obvious reasons. FAA requirements, as we said before, they're lenient. The process is brutal, though. It can really be truly brutal, and you want to make sure to have all your ducks in a row. One of the things we do is help people with putting together their packages, keeping things organized, working with their doctors. Hey, doc, if you can put this word in there, that's probably going to be a little bit less of a red flag to the FAA, as long as you feel like it's accurate. That's the kind of ways that we tend to help out with these kinds of scenarios. Yes, sir?
Before you get too far here.
I think I've gone too far.
Get the cancer situation, chemo. Now, you got people that go through chemo and they get cancer free. You got ones that go through aren't cancer free. Where's the line on that thing? Because if you're cancer free, they got to convince the FAA that this guy's he or she is cancer free. And
So is your question, can you fly for cancer free? And the answer is probably. Yes, sir. And we can talk more about the technical parts of it, because maybe you've got a specific question. And I'm just about finished with this, and then we'll open it up to the questions that anybody may have. Anybody know that airport?
it's over in Montana.
Folsom, that's it. Folsom. Yep, that's it. Like I said, we do have a lot of resources I would encourage people to take advantage of. They're free. You can go on our website and you can take, we have a list of all the medications that the FAA accepts. It's the largest list that you're going to find. We do online color vision testing, online hearing testing, online other vision tests. And as I said, you can take things like a practice FAA medical. You can actually fill out the same stuff you're going to fill out through an AME. And then we're going to respond to you and say, just so you know, this is what the issues are. You should have these documents ready before you go show up to your AME. That's my son and my daughter there. And we are out of here. So now to the questions. I would be very happy to answer that question a little bit further, just to kind of go a little bit more into the oncology stuff. Again, if you're cancer free, if the likelihood for recurrence is low, the chances for you to fly are almost certain. But the FAA does have wait periods, depending on where the cancer started, where the cancer went, and that can be the problem sometimes, because it metastasizes to other places, or it shows other,
But you have the two entities battling against one another.
Which
The
two
FAA
entities?
And your flight surgeon, he thinks one way, these guys think some way.
Well, your flight surgeon is unlikely to be an oncologist, so when it comes to that, I wouldn't necessarily want him to be the only person that's in your camp. You want your oncologist to have an understanding of what the FAA wants, and that's where we can help. We can tell them, hey, this is what the FAA is looking for. This is the details that they're going to require, otherwise you're never going to fly. So we can talk more about that maybe afterwards, and I can tell you a little bit more about your specific situation or whoever you're talking about.
It's a friend of mine.
Sure.
And he got his medical back right after he was done. And then you hear other instances where they didn't get back right away, 6 months to a year.
Yeah, what he's saying for those of you on Zoom, so there's quite a bit of variability based upon, again, where the cancer started. If it went someplace else, how significant that cancer was. Again, having cancer in your brain versus cancer in your prostate is a
I'm
completely
talking
different.
basically prostate cancer, because it seems like in the loose here, we've got a lot of apps from, you know, from.
Well, there's a lot of prostate cancer anywhere, and so to your question, there is a lot of variability in prostate cancer too. There's tremendous variability, so you can have really, I hate to use the word benign, but something simple that's likely to not progress very quickly, or you can have something that's extremely fast and it may be more problematic. And again, it may not have stayed there, it may have moved other places, and so all of those things are a factor in the decision tree as to whether that's going to be eligible. So I know it can get confusing, especially if you're saying, well, this guy got it and I got the same condition, but it's really not the same. And if you've seen one of those cases, you've seen one of those cases. You've not seen them all. There's quite a bit. Yes, sir. Yes, John.
Dave, a little over 5 years ago, basic med got started.
Yes, basic med.
Has there been any statistical analysis of people's life? Have they done excellent? Is it part of the null report by any chance?
So there are some good numbers. It's predominantly a good report. It's not a completely good report. A lot of the people that got into basic med were people who couldn't get a medical, and that's why they never even tried. So, you would expect it to have actually gotten worse. And I don't have the particular numbers to present here, but I'm just saying it's a relatively safe picture considering, the fact that there's a tremendous amount of people who couldn't get a medical and now all of a sudden they're flying. You would think, uh-oh. But then again, not that there hasn't been accidents, but it is safe considering.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Regarding sleep sleep apnea, pulmonary. Sleep apnea. So say clients.
Yeah, so the question is, if you had CPAP, or excuse me, if you had sleep apnea, but you used something like CPAP to take care of that or to offset that, to mitigate it, is it acceptable to the FAA? The answer is yes. And there are other devices as well. There are dental devices, which the FAA doesn't particularly care for as much, but a lot of it has to do with them being able to monitor and follow it. There are those devices now that have become a little bit more electronic, so they are. And so the FAA is kind of liking them a little bit more as a result of that, I think. The other thing is that there's a procedure now where you can have an implant, and that implant sort of nudges you when you start to have this problem. The FAA has approved those as well. So as long as you have to be compliant with the device. So you can't just buy the CPAP and then get the waiver. And to your point, what is the way the FAA does it? It is a waiver, typically speaking from the FAA. The AME can issue it in his office initially, but then it will come back. And then the AME can typically renew that. But it does allow for that as long as you correct the problem, because as you said, it is a problem that's creating some cardiovascular problems for people. It probably has for years. We just didn't know about it. Yes, sir.
You said about basic med.
Yes, sir. A basic
You're
med.
saying that people can get basic med without ever having an FAA medical?
No, I didn't say that, but they hadn't had it for a while. What I meant to say, if I said that they could get it.
2016?
Yeah, 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you had a medical since 2006, you can get basic med, provided that you don't have one of the disqualifying conditions. I don't want to tax my memory here, but basically the conditions are, if you have coronary artery disease, you have to get a one-time special issuance waiver for that. If you have, again, this is how you get, whether you can get basic med just straight away. If you've had a current medical that wasn't suspended, denied, or revoked since 2006, I think that's the name. And if you don't have one of these other conditions like coronary artery disease or interruption to normal neurological function without a satisfactory explanation or cause, which is another big phrase for stroke, And there's a few others like schizophrenia, like we were talking about earlier. So if you don't have those things, essentially you're likely to be able or eligible at least for basic med. Now, we were talking earlier, I was talking to someone about, do we have a list of practitioners that you can get basic med authorizations from? And we don't get involved with that. But there's quite a few physicians, any physician, it doesn't have to be an AME, who authorizes the CMED form that you fill out to get basic med. You do have to take a little course, it's about 20 minutes long, and then you can apply under basic med in most cases. It's not the perfect answer to everybody. Shane could probably tell you more about basic med than I could because he deals with the airplanes themselves. But essentially anything under a 6,000-pound aircraft and 5 passengers or less, and you're pretty much flying a private pilot operation, again with some limitations. Yes, Shane.
Could you touch on, and this is something that you educated me on, but maybe everybody else in the room might enjoy this conversation. But, the knowledge of a disqualifying medication or problem that we have, not only affects, from my understanding, is basic med, but also, a sport pilot that you don't need a medical for per se, but there are some exclusions in there.
Yeah, so are there any exceptions for basic med? Can you just fly basic med no matter what condition you have? And the answer is no. Like, let's say, for instance, we were talking earlier about the fact that the FAA doesn't like subtle incapacitation. Let's say you get this condition. Let's say you got a cold even. Are you supposed to go out and fly with a cold? FAR 6153 says if you know or have reason to know of a condition that precludes you from safely performing your flying duties, you're supposed to ground yourself. Doesn't say you have to tell the FAA. Doesn't say it's permanent, but you're supposed to ground yourself until that's no longer a factor. So if you and your physician feel like you're safe, then you can resume flying. But if you're under the influence or adverse influence of medication, or if you have a condition that makes it unsafe for you to perform your flying duties, technically you're not allowed to fly basic med at that point. Good question. Yes, Joe.
This is an observation. I've done basic med now 2 cycles.
2 cycles of basic.
Just a second. And for what it's worth, I found that I thought more about my health with basic med than I ever did about going to an AME, and having them check my heart, my hearing, and my vision. I'm out of there. I don't think about it yet. So that's an observation.
So why do you think that you thought more about your health when you did basic med? It's an interesting perspective.
Because I had to. I mean, I'm taking the little test to go through the course, so it forces you to think about some things that you walk into an A&E and 20 minutes later or half an hour later, you walk up and you're good. You don't think about it.
Good. Thank you. So I've got a few questions up here. Does anybody else have any blue cards with questions on them? Hopefully I can read these. I'm gonna have to put some glasses on.
I do have another question for you.
Yeah,
Chief.
please.
So when you're talking about like the FAA in general reviewing these cases, who in the FAA is doing that? Is it like a collective group of doctors or?
So that gets a little hairy. We have 2 former FAA employees that are working with us now. The former chief of medical certification that ran the FAA's medical certification division, and the former Southwest regional flight surgeon that ran the FAA's FAA Southwest region regional office. And those are people that used to make these decisions, and they had other people that were there with them as well. When COVID hit, and there's been a whole flurry of things that have happened over the last couple of years, but there's retirements that are now going on, just like any other thing. You got the pilots that are saying, hey, I'm just going to retire early type of thing. You got that kind of stuff going on. Amazon came into Oklahoma, just down the street. It used to be, it was a great job if you were being a reviewer working for the aeromedical certification division at the FAA. It was a good job. Now they're having to compete with Amazon and some of the other opportunities that are competitive with young folks these days. And they're having a hard time giving people jobs and having people doing the work. The other thing was, of course, when this whole COVID thing hit, everybody left. And literally the physicians that were making the decisions were making them from home. Most of them still are. And the people that were doing the scanning of those records were sometimes new hires. and didn't have much training. And so there's been some real obstacles with regard to what's going on at the FAA. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but typically the way it's supposed to work, you got people that scan the documentation in, and then look at the cases, and then get them to a flight physician that will just make the decision, the medical decision in the end. Sometimes there's a panel that meets, for instance, with coronary artery disease. There's a cardiovascular panel that meets every other month, and all of the first class and second class coronary artery disease cases get certified or decided in that form.
No,
Did I answer?
no, you did. Thanks.
Yes, please.
Are you saying that the document reviewers have as much experience as an Amazon employee?
No, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is the scanners and the people that are opening the mail and other jobs, there's quite a few jobs over at the aeromedical certification division that came. And so, no, I wasn't saying that at all. I was saying that those people are it's hard to compete with those folks and get those people in there to help you. So, I'm putting my glasses on here. So. I'm just going to read this. Encourage pilots not to do the full body CT scans from private companies or screenings, just to be sure. You referred to things showing up on the MRIs or CTs, incidentals, which can lead up to other expensive tests to rule out the real problem. That is a true thing. We do not recommend people taking the rapid CT scans unless there's really a good reason for it. And this is the calcium score that people get to see if they've got a lot of calcium in the heart. The problem is that camera doesn't see through calcium; it sees calcium, so you can't get a really good image. And so then people end up on the table for a catheterization, which, albeit small, has a mortality rate associated. So if you don't really need that, it'd be kind of a real bummer if you got a calcium score that was a little bit high, and all of a sudden you've got a procedure that takes your life when you really didn't even have anything going on. So. Not to say that those calcium tests aren't good for certain things, but obviously your physician needs to make that decision and make it good. But yes, sir.
Just to clarify.
Speak for
that,
physicians.
I'm talking more about the mailings that you get, do the CT scans, all the screening tests to make sure that you don't have something you're not aware of. Well, there are a lot of these, what we call incidental illness, that have nothing to do with your health, that show up because of that. So if your doctor orders something, well, I mean, if your doctor orders a test, by all means, I need to follow through. But in terms of people sending out mailings and when we need to do ultrasounds and CT scans of the whole body, just to check for something like really disordered.
Yes, great point. Absolutely, 100%. If you don't need it, if your doctor wants to do it because it's in your best interest for your medical care, that's one thing. But you should run it by your AME or an organization like us. We answer those kinds of questions for free all day long. And so if you want to know, hey, is this test going to give me a problem with my FAA medical, give us a call. Here's the next question is, why is the FAA so focused on CBD? Are lotions and creams safe and acceptable to the FAA? Consequences for use. I thought I kind of talked a little bit about that earlier, but what I was saying about that is that, again, a lot of these people that are selling this stuff don't label it to say how much THC or even if THC is in it. And so you can very easily take something into your body that isn't acceptable and THC would be in there. And I think the other question is, are these lotions and creams acceptable to the FAA? If it doesn't have THC in it, yes. But if you're taking a lotion on and it's all of a sudden the THC is going into your skin, you could have a problem. Again, if you're a third-class pilot, you're not drug tested, there's a possibility that no one would ever really figure it out. But I wouldn't necessarily think it's a great idea for my health. I like to know what's going in there. I may do something stupid in spite of that, but alcohol is a good example of that. I mean, alcohol is not really great for you. I don't know if you guys are do you review a neuropsychological and cognitive evaluation done by the FAA specifications for pilot ability to hold a medical certificate? And so I don't know who asked the question. If you're asking, do I review these things? I do read them, but I'm not the person that's doing the reviews to determine the eligibility. As I mentioned earlier, we do have former FAA employees that do some of that. We also work very closely with there's a program called the HIMSS program. And again, we're getting late on time here, so I'm not going to go into too much of that. But there's 200 practitioners, 100 psychologists and 100 psychiatrists that do most of that work. And I wouldn't refer you to every single one of them just because they're on that list. It is very important who you go see, and we work closely with several of those who do a really good job with this and understand that you don't have to look for a mouse behind every door to get a good, safe evaluation for these folks. But so I don't know if I answered the question. I hope I did. Last question I've got. Yeah. Kidney stones. After passing a kidney stone, what is the required or recommended self-ground time? Please expand on the neurology as a disease that complicates medical certification. We could be here all night about the neurology part. If someone who ever asked this question wants to talk about the neurology stuff, please come and talk to me afterwards. As far as the kidney stone thing is concerned, so I'm not a physician. That is not who I am. And I'm not qualified really to tell you whether it's safe for you to do anything in particular. Your doctor is the person that needs to do that. He needs to evaluate whether that's safe. In some cases, and it brings up an important point that I'll close with that I didn't really make tonight, and that is there are 15 disqualifying conditions that are listed in the FARS. There are things like coronary artery disease, schizophrenia, heavy duty things. If you don't have one of those 15 things, and you're in between your medical, let's say you just went 2 weeks ago and got your medical, and you've got several months on your medical, and you and your doctor have discover a condition that isn't in one of those 15 conditions, it's not a disqualifying condition, but it is something you know the FAA is going to want information about. If you and your doctor decide that you're safe to fly under FAR 6153, then that is not necessarily a problem with the FAA. The FAA, if they know about it, if you go to see an AME, he may say you shouldn't be flying. But from a standpoint of the regulatory components, it is acceptable if, for instance, you had a kidney stone removed, you worked with your doctor says you're safe, you're fine, there's no more kidney stones, and you want to return to flying, as long as you and your doctor feel that you're safe to fly, that's fine. But what's here, one final point about that that's extremely important from a time standpoint is that the time to submit that information to the FAA, though, is immediate. And the reason for that is not because you're in a rush to get a problem, but because you don't want to show up at the AME's door with a stack of records that he can't do anything with. For whatever reason, he may not be able to certify you. Now you're grounded and you're waiting for the FAA to make a decision, and it can be several months. So it's important to know when and where to report things and what those timing aspects are. I really appreciate you guys letting me talk tonight and come in. It was an enjoyable time to join you. I've got two things. So I think that was going to be the best question. So there's the hat. And there's two more things that Shane came here tonight with No Limits Aviation. Him and I have been friends for a little while. I hate to admit that, it's true. And he does an amazing job over in Coeur d'Alene with the flight programs that he's got over there with young people as well as old guys like me. And he's got some great airplanes to fly. And so we've had a lot of good things and times together over there. Shane has offered to provide 2 free Stearman rides to the lucky people in the room that have a paperclip that is black or dark. Everybody else's paperclips are silver, but whoever has a dark paperclip has a Stearman ride. So get with Shane afterwards to get your certificate. And again, thank you, Shane, for donating those. That's it's a great, huge gift. Thank you.
The man comes to a meeting bearing gifts. Let's give him a round of applause, folks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, David Hale, for that wonderful, articulate, very, very important presentation. I got to tell you, that's probably one of our more informative ones that we've had. And so be on the lookout for many more of those kinds of presentations as the future provides us opportunity. Just a couple of things to close us up tonight. First thing I want to bring up is our calendar of events. Again, whether you are super with the technology or not, there's many places to get this information. I want to draw your attention to our annual calendar. These are the last of our events for 2021 listed. Certainly want you to be at our next meeting, which is on November 17th. We do have a board meeting in case you are interested in maybe volunteering a little bit more, perhaps as a board committee volunteer. Lots of leadership opportunities. So if you're interested, check us out October 27th at Dave Lucky's hangar. But great place to get lots and lots of information. The next thing I want to remind you once again that the nominations, we take that very seriously because leadership is important. Aviation is a leadership activity, in my opinion, and we have a lot of great leaders. So whether it's us or other folks that you know that could be serving in these capacities, we would love for you to provide that information or give those folks an opportunity by nominating them, or certainly voting in the same group because we know we're awesome too. We have a couple of things I want to share as well. The next thing is the Youth Scholarship Foundation. We're considering opening up that door to applicants here soon. John, if you are able to pull up our Aviation Scholarship Fund page, we're going to see some changes to this, some slight modifications, but this is an area where we have a lot of opportunity to share the benefits of what our Youth Aviation Scholarship does for folks that are working towards their aviation goals. A lot of students, a lot of young folks that are looking to accomplish their goals. It takes a lot of money. Last year, we were very fortunate to be able to bring 4 $2,000 scholarships. So as you probably were solicited towards and experienced throughout this year, we raised a lot of money. And so we want to see this grow. We want to see more folks applying and more folks getting the advantages of this scholarship. So draw your attention to that when you get a chance. There's going to be more information posted there. There's certainly ways for young folks to apply. Last thing I want you guys to do, if you haven't already, make sure to thank your server, Crystal, tonight. She did a fantastic job. If you didn't already tip her, make sure you do that on your way out. And stop by our station over there and make sure if you haven't already initialed for your Wings credit, do that. And thank you, all of you, for being here tonight and making One WPA a great day. Any other announcements?
2 items.
Okay.
One, as soon as the web manager figures out how to add downloading the scholarship application, it will be there.
Okay, we just made a decision. We're going to open up the application process as soon as we get the technology figured out.
As soon as the web manager learns when the SATA Christmas party is going to be and where it's going to be, it will be posted on the calendar.
Should we tell everybody that you're the web manager?
Anybody that wants the job to have it.
And ladies and gentlemen, Dave has maintained this despite his self-professed failures in technology. He's done a fantastic job with our website. It certainly has been around here a lot longer on our Facebook page. But you've done a great job.
Bad language that goes on when I try to update this thing.
I know you've slipped a couple of cuss words out there. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for tonight. Thank you very much for being here. You guys have a great evening.